Check, check. Can everybody hear me? Can't see anybody, so I'm assuming that everybody can hear me. I'm also going to turn the music down. Talking, echoing the Bunnyman track. Okay, it's 12:05. Hopefully everybody's got their disco dog in their hand. And we are ready to rock. Okay, I usually have two monitors or three monitors, but now I have two. Because today I am on location for this webinar. I am at FCC in the offices, taking a break, training up some of their staff, and rushing ourselves into another room just so we can set up this webinar. So I am not in a prison holding cell. I am in one of these nice little boardrooms, and we are going to talk all about the design sprint today. And we are people who facilitate the sprints, and hopefully you are people who eventually want to facilitate your own sprints or start experimenting with the sprint. And so that's why we thought, we just came out of a sprint with FCC last month and it went relatively well. So we thought, hey, why don't we invite our client, and I'm going to introduce Roger Hounjet in a bit, to talk more from his point of view, the things that worked, the things that didn't work. But before we get into that, I am going to do a quick poll just so people can get comfortable in their seats. And we're just going to talk about and ask you guys who've been a part of these sort of sprints. So we're going to have a little poll that pops up in front of you, and you're just going to have to select one thing saying that you've either been a part of a facilitated or part of a sprint or facilitated a design sprint, or you've applied parts of the sprint. Again, a lot of people just kind of pull the book apart and just choose what they want, or maybe you've just read or heard about the sprint somewhere, or maybe you just have never even really had any experience and you're just curious to learn what a sprint is. Always good for me and Roger to know who's in the room and what level we should be talking about. So give you guys 1 second to self-select there, and then we will be on our way. Okay, so the poll's gone, and looks like we got a good almost 20% of people who actually facilitated or used it, and there's also 10% of people who've applied parts of it, and about 32% have read or heard about it, and 40%, almost half, have very little knowledge and is about what a sprint is. So this is good. It's a good spread. It's kind of what I expected. So let's get going on it. And before we start, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Albert Jame. I'm the Chief Experience Officer, not CEO, but CXO of Zoo. And Zoo, just in case you're wondering and seeing the names on the board, there are a good half of the people who've worked with us or definitely have known about us, but there's a few names that we've never seen. So the way I like to describe it is that we are just a digital products and service consultancy here in Saskatoon, but today I'm in Regina. And we're not huge. We're just like a 40-some person consultancy that works in the digital space, doing consulting, UX design, development, launching products and services for various other clients. If you are in Saskatoon and are kind of curious, we always invite you to kind of take a spin around the office. And we definitely have a nice little room here that we use called the Experience Room to run a lot of our sprints and a lot of our workshops. And again, the type of clients we work with are typically enterprise government organizations that are looking to kind of shake things up in the way that they approach problems. So this is just a quick plug about where I'm working right now is under the Zoo Academy arm, where it's kind of the training and capacity building division of Zoo, where we go in and help organizations. We take what we know from the field and apply it to some training. And so today I'm in day 2 of the training up a whole team of experience designers, doing it in person, but we also do it, as you can imagine, remotely. So there's a lot of different options to select working with Zoo or Zoo Academy. But that's not why you're here. We're going to be talking about the design sprint today. And quickly before that, I just want to introduce Roger Hounjet, who is going to be coming on right now. Hopefully you're there, Roger. And Roger,
hello,
fresh from Hawaii.
No, Dominican Republic.
Dominican Republic. Okay, you know what? I saw that tan and I was like, yeah, that's actually maybe not a Hawaiian tan. That looks like a little Caribbean. So you got a little bit of sun, it looks like.
Yeah. We landed last night, so brain fog might be real,
Any challenges on the flights up or flights back?
just took several hours to get our bags past the baggage point, but other than that, everything was smooth. So
Oh,
landed remotely close to on time every time. So all is good.
perfect. Well, but Roger, before we start getting into it, I'm going to kind of explain what the sprint is. Maybe just kind of explain who FCC is and what your role is at FCC, and then we can kind of go from there.
Yeah, for sure. So for those who don't know FCC or Farm Credit Canada, we offer lending to farms and agri-food and businesses. And so my role here as a sales enablement manager is really to, our team really owns the sales process or how we develop relationships with customers. And my role specifically is more geared towards the lending tools or the selling tools, I should say. So things like how do we document things on how we interact with our customers, recent development of a financial benchmarking tool, things like that, tools to really help our customers become better and our salespeople to be able to provide better advice. So I work very closely with our sales teams and with IT because a lot of our tools obviously have to be developed or things like that. So that's a little bit about myself and Farm Credit.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. It's a good example. I like, real world examples, when describing the sprint, because sometimes when you study it, they always try to go, it's a coffee shop or it's a new startup. But, I like the fact that you guys are this $1 billion organization and it's enterprise, and you guys are still using this methodology to kind of disrupt the way that you guys are working. So I'm going to talk about the sprint really quickly and just kind of show what we sort of went through. And then, Roger, I'm going to start just asking you questions. But for the people who don't know, the 40% in the room, the way that we like describing the sprint is that it's just not a 5-day anymore. For us, it's a 4-day process for rapidly solving big challenges, creating new products, or improving existing ones. So it kind of compresses potentially months of works into a few days. Roger, would you agree with that?
I 100% agree with that.
Perfect.
It really clarifies what challenges you're trying to solve and gets you to that finish line that much quicker.
So how the sprint came about was a fellow named Jake Knapp, who famously worked at Google and worked on the Google Hangouts, but he noticed a kind of an issue just in the way that a lot of software is being developed, or even just problems are solved within the organizations. This sprint book he wrote with some colleagues became a real big hit because it was kind of a good recipe on using kind of sort of design thinking methodologies or just problem solving methodologies in a very kind of prescriptive way. But Jake, we actually got the chance to meet him down in San Francisco. We actually spoke at this one sprint academy sort of thing that they're running down there. And they always talk about the common problem that happened in corporate offices, not just to do with software, but sometimes like cross-functional teams find it hard to align with common business objectives. They always said that's a blocker to make us going quicker. Also, teams have pressure to be innovative, but often don't know how to start. It's just innovation is just kind of your fingers crossed, people are creative, but this kind of gives you a little bit of a framework. And also product development cycles run too long. And I think everybody can kind of, agree to that. It caused some teams to lose enthusiasm and focus. We've definitely seen that where by the end, you're just like limping across the finish line. And a lot of times this diagram really says it all, is that you really think it's going to be this, like you have the idea, you build it, and you launch. But really, we kind of accept that it's going to look more like this, where it's, a little bit longer of a build. This is typical like development software world. But the actuality is that it turns into something more like this, where the build is just way too long before we actually start seeing how users use it. And this is what the sprint is all about. It's being able to take that idea, the data quickly. So it's iterative and you throw things in front of people within a few days, not a few weeks, not a few months. So we're going to talk about that. And today we're not going to talk about every single step. We just can't do that within 30 minutes. But what we're going to talk about is just the big steps. And then Roger, your sort of kind of play-by-play commentary on why it was effective. And we always like using this slide to talk about, a sprint can help you learn these things. If it's a good idea, if it's the right thing, does it solve the right problem? Should we even build this? Or is our hypothesis correct? But we always say, don't count on a sprint in your company if you think you're going to build some huge thing in a few days. That's just not what it's about. Or even figure out all the inner workings and all the hyper details, or even evaluating the technical feasibility. It's really sort of this yes or no sort of thing. This is our schedule, and we're going to be showing you sort of the nuts and bolts of like what some of these sprint boards look like today, and jogging Roger's memory because it was like almost a month and a half ago. But really, the Monday and Tuesday, Roger, you might want to agree to this. Like it was really important to have the big group there, and you could tell even after the Monday when people came for the Monday and they left, you could tell that they were really sad that they couldn't come back for the Tuesday when everybody was like voting on the ideas. Sometimes they don't really know what they're getting into, and so they don't realize till they're there that the Monday and Tuesday are really important. Would you agree?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, you want the larger group to be there the Monday to the Tuesday. Anyone that my first time experiencing it too, I didn't know what I was getting into, but it was very energizing by the end, for sure.
For sure.
Feel energized and lots of good stuff. Yeah.
But then on the Wednesday, we have a smaller group typically who are kind of maybe the designer and maybe a developer or somebody who's a subject matter expert working to just stitch together this prototype that everybody agreed to build. But we still had people hanging out with their computers just in the room just to be kind of like validation and checks throughout the Wednesday. But it is more important on the Thursday that everybody come back and watch real users interact with these sort of prototypes. So that Monday to Thursday is what we're doing, and it looks pretty laid back, but it is kind of a blur. Would you agree? It's kind of, you just go through step by step. And even the person who facilitates, I still have to look at the manual of like what the next step is. It's really hard to know exactly what the next step is.
Yeah, no, it happens pretty quickly, but you'll see you get to results really quickly as well because of the structure. So.
Mm-hmm. And as you remember, Roger, you kind of played a dual role in all of this. You were Judge Judy, and you were the decider, and it's really important to have a decider. We're going to talk about that role in a bit, but this is kind of just the vibe of the day, you know. And again, the product that we were building, Roger, give us as much as you want on the actual sprint that we were building for you. Again, it doesn't really matter too much about what it was, but just kind of give us an idea of like the problem that we were having.
Yeah, so essentially we, for lack of a better term, we have an internal CRM, or how we document our conversations with customers and things like that. And right now it's a catch-all for everything, and it's really hard to understand the history of what's occurred with the customer. And really what we're trying to do is get that to a better state so we can really understand the history of the client at a glance. And that's what this sprint was all about. Coming into it, that wasn't exactly the problem we thought we were trying to solve, but this process helped us get there. So basically we wanted to be able to document things, or be able to view how we are interacting with customers and being able to serve them better.
For sure. And these are just some of the highlight photos. And again, some of the other photos we had were way too detailed, which is almost pointless to see. And I'm going to go into mural to kind of show like a messy mural board in a second. But again, it's a lot of what you think. It's just like people working in a room. We always say like have a bright room that's energizing. So, and again, FCC has this beautiful room that you can use the windows and the wall space, and it's kind of easy to be in there. It's not like a windowless sort of like dungeon in the IT department. Even your IT department has awesome offices. So can't complain. But this isn't every single photo, but the few questions I want to kind of jump into right away is just, how did you know in your mind that this was a successful sprint for your product? Like what told you, again, from even a measurable standpoint or just a gut feeling, what was telling you that this was successful? Because I know we've done some other ones previous to now, this one, and it wasn't maybe as successful, but this one definitely felt a little bit different.
Yeah, I would say what made it feel successful is that everyone was energized about the direction we were going, and we had alignment at every step of the testing. Like there were things we could work on, but the general idea of what big issue we're trying to solve was very well aligned to on all levels. So that was the biggest like success measure for me, to know that we were trying to solve the right problem. And it wasn't just something we were thinking of in the back end. Like when we were testing it, people were very much aligned with the concept of where we were headed. So
right.
that'd be the big thing. And the other one was that, we knew we had runway to get it done, and it was, alignment. Basically, alignment was a big word. If I wanted to use one word, we had alignment on the problem and the solution we're trying to get to.
So solving problems isn't new in an organization. Everybody has their own kind of mechanism to solve a problem. How would you have gone about it normally versus this one? And then what made you think that the sprint was the right idea for this?
Oh, that's a really tough question, just because every problem can be solved in a million different ways. And to say that it would have been done this way versus the design sprint is really difficult to say. But historically, lots of the problems we have solved at FCC, we've kind of spent a lot of time in the idea stages, and then just build, and then it just launches, and you kind of get the sense of whether you hit the mark or not after you spent months building and launching. So doing these sprints has really changed the way we do things, even in the organization. So the big win here is that you don't spend all that time building. You get to the right problem and you can test real quick. So sorry, I forget the actual question you were asking.
I was just like, no, that's good. Like how you guys would have solved that problem naturally, but it's you're right. Like working at FCC in the walls, you guys have so many different frameworks and ways to attack it, and each IT problem is slightly different. But how do you go about getting a sprint done at FCC? And a lot of people that work here at different enterprises, who do you have to go through? Like, what's the kind of workflow for you guys to approve a sprint?
Well, it needs to be prioritized work. So that's a whole other framework that I'm not going to get into. But once we know there's a problem, or like an outcome we're trying to drive towards, or a problem we're trying to solve, then we determine, is it something we can test, and is there really a design part of it that we can test? And if it's something that we can test and we can really hone in on the problem, then there's at least some aspect of this sprint can be applied. And I would say, because we've done these sprints often enough, we put elements of the sprint regardless of what kind of problem we're trying to solve. We really go wide on the problem, go into the idea stage, and then focus on one problem at a time and get to the outcome we need to. So the process in like to get it formalized like this would be something like the spend. Is it a big undertaking from a development standpoint, and is there some like web app or something that can be tested, or that we're developing that we can test along the way? And if it's something we need to develop from an IT standpoint, and it's either customer facing or going out to the masses of our 2,000 employees, then yeah, it probably warrants doing a design sprint and spending the time and doing this.
Okay, good answer. So let's talk about the roles of the people who were in there. If you can kind of recall the people from Eric and Mo and some of the developers, but who were all in there, and why was that selected? As a lot of people ask us, like, who do we bring to these sprints?
Yeah. So we had the decider, which was myself, which would be kind of you have the decider who kind of owns the work in a sense. And then we had the developing team. So the team of developers, I think, is a really important aspect to have there. And when I say developers, I mean like the Scrum team working on it. So it was the developers, analyst, product owner, and oftentimes an IT architect is part of it. This time he was not able to be there, but it is a good resource to have. And then most importantly, by far, you need the end user. So this year is maybe not the most important, but having someone that's using it as part of the design sprint is super, super helpful. In this case, it was an internal web app that we were creating. So the end user is actually FCC employees. So it was relatively easy to get them part of that sprint. But I could see if you had customers or something as part of that, if it's an outside, I think there's huge value in it.
For sure. I think the one thing I took away is that the developers were really excited to actually hear the user. And, for me, we're always bringing the users and the developers together, but it's always kind of refreshing to know that not all the organizations do that. And so, the developers were finally going, it's actually really interesting to hear the internal person. It's, again, not a customer. It's still like your colleague who's using it, give them feedback on the application that they're building. So I really liked how excited the developers were just to kind of be in the room for that, because a lot of times historically they don't get invited to these things.
Yeah, I've heard it again and again. I've been in a few sprints, but this one in particular, all the developers were brand new to this, and they couldn't say enough how valuable it was to hear the actual problems and hear how people are using it. They're so used to being told, this is how you do, this is what you need to do, boom, 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 but they don't understand the how all the time. And this kind of links the two together. And at the end of the day, we ended up with way better designs. And when we have to tweak things, they have the context to be able to take it to the next level. So
for sure. Okay, Roger, I'm going to jump into my my mural board here. And again, I wanted to show roughly what am I refreshed here? I'm just going to see if I'm actually online. Here we go. So this is kind of the dirty way to look at a sprint board. And this is something that we do sometimes remote. The boards are very similar, whether on mural or in a room. And we did ours in person, but this kind of represents, the end results. And so this is kind of pulling back the curtain for everybody. This is part of one of our training sprints, so we can kind of show you the inner workings of all the details. And it's kind of a fun challenge statement that we created, is like, how might we improve the first day of work for new employees, regardless if it's like a communication tool that you're using for your interactions on your project, Roger. The steps are the same. So, on day one, just to jog your memory, we had an interview with a user, and these are all the notes and how might we's from the interviews. And this is just kind of the affinity map area of like the categories that they were in. All the hearts are the votes from the members to decide which ones we really want to solve. And then the purple check marks are kind of where the deciders. So like a person like you, Roger, would have been putting your vote on and pulling your top voted how might we's based upon the interviews. And for the sprint that we did, Roger, we did 3, I think, interviews with end users all across Canada, and they just piped in remotely through Teams. And so it's really easy to kind of just bring that and give them 30 minutes or 15 minutes just to talk about like their favorite parts about the interactions window. And then we take these how might we voted ideas and we put them on a map. And so this next thing we did, you remember, Roger, I was out there just frantically drawing the entire interactions thing and just arrows everywhere. But we made a very simple one for a first day of work. These are all the steps. These are all the kind of layers of different people they interact with. But then we actually voted on this area and put this how might we on top. Is basically this area in the process is where we wrote how might we help new employees feel confident on their first day. And then you voted, or the decider voted, that this is the area on the map that we're looking for. We always choose something typically upstream to solve because it usually solves downstream problems as well. Before we go into ideation, we take a break here. Roger, I'm going to ask your opinion about this. Is we do a 2-year goal where we just ask everybody to write down what they think in 2 years the goal is supposed to be. So again, we give everybody a little bit of time, and then they post it up there and everybody reads it out loud, and then we vote, and then the decider puts their final thing on here, like 2 years time, all the employees demonstrate or indicate that we have an onboarding process that makes them feel empowered. Then we do pretty much the same exercise here, but we call this the sprint questions. And it's basically a can we get over some sort of negative thing or some obstacle in our way? So get everybody to vote on everybody's can we statements, or can we address each new employee's expectations? Can we expect a new hire to be engaged before starting? Can we eliminate first day anxiety, or is it just human nature? And so we decided on that. And we use that as sort of a springboard or a thing that reminds us always what we're after and the obstacle that's in our way. And Roger, can you remember the 2-year goal and 2 years and the sprint questions and how it guided us?
Yeah, I don't remember the 2-year goal specifically, but it was like it definitely put things into context
Yeah,
along the
we
way.
used it and we just reminded ourselves, and I kind of forget about it as well. But in the moment, we were always going back to it. It felt.
Yeah, yeah, it's a constant. It's kind of creates those goalposts, and is like along the way as you're generating ideas. Number one, is it solving the problem we're trying to solve? And number two, is it helping us get to our 2-year goal? So it helps you think short term and long term.
For sure. So the activity we do right after that, before we get into ideation, is we try to get some inspiration. So we get people to go away and we get them to find other demos or other products that are doing similar things in that how might we. So for this one, it's all about onboarding and empowerment. And so people were choosing different brands and different things specifically. For example, Good Life Fitness, they like the whole idea of offering fitness and health information, and they talk about what they like about it. All the hearts are just part of that heat map where everybody gets to vote. But as you can see, we zoom out and there's a lot of different ideas and we go through each one and then people get to vote on it. Roger, do you remember doing the lightning demos?
Yeah, 100%. This one for me is one of the toughest parts, but one of the probably the more enlightening ones, because it why reinvent something that's already been done well. So yeah, it's great to see all the ideas that come out of this.
Even though we tell people to go walk away with it and bring back an idea, sometimes they don't. But then what happens, and if you're a facilitator, this is our tip, just go with what you have. You might only have 1 or 2 or 3, and you start it. And instantly, when other people start seeing other people's lightning demos, what we saw in our sprint, Roger, was that everybody started coming out of the woodwork with theirs afterwards. And then we ended up filling the full half an hour because people were like, oh, that kind of reminds me of this. And now I know what this activity is about. So you kind of have to, you don't get discouraged if people are only giving you 1 or 2 at the beginning. And every sprint that I've been a part of, it's always like that. Half the class doesn't have one to bring, but then they do by the end.
Yeah.
Okay. Then from there, probably the most famous part about the sprint people remember is this sort of ideation thing, which is the crazy 8s. And it is basically 8 ideas in 8 minutes to solve that how might we. 8 different ideas. And so we basically play music, change the song every minute, and we just go next panel, and you basically have to sit at your desk and try to solve it in a way that, you know, can unlock some ideas. We give you some doodling time and some note-taking time ahead of time, but this is kind of the crux of it right here. And everybody on the mural side, they submit it to us and we put it up. But in a room, Roger, we just put them, we didn't even we just got you to sit with somebody and share your initial ideas. We didn't even put them up. What can you say about crazy 8s? Is it like anxiety inducing, or do you enjoy it, or do you think it's a necessary?
It's anxiety inducing. I will be honest about that, but it gets you to move on quick. And the first probably couple times I did it was difficult for me to get over the fact that I'm not a good drawer, but you know, it helps you kind of get through, you know, brings your inner childhood out and allows you to be creative in a different way that a lot of us are probably not used to working. And I would say doing this exercise several times has actually changed the way many of us actually do ideation. We do draw a lot more now because
right. And it's I keep saying that we just resort back to the spreadsheets and docs all the time, and sometimes hands, and we just kind of go and and then just go to this next window and you open it up and it goes bloop. Like sometimes you just should just draw that out. And this is what we're trying to encourage, is more, you know, encouraging the idea that drawing is not just for children. It could be something that is possibly used for adults in work.
You just have to think about how many of us are visual learners or things like that, right? So it only makes sense that you draw it out. It can sometimes take a bit of time to get to this point where your drawings are good, but it's all about getting that idea on paper, and it doesn't have to be pretty.
Exactly. So then the next step after the crazy 8s, as you remember, was the concept poster. So you basically take your favorite idea or combine them, and you get like a lot longer, maybe like an hour, to draw out a 3-panel storyboard of how that idea would work. And so you can see this is like slightly higher fidelity. And after the first day, you essentially draw it and you hand it in to the facilitator and you walk out and you don't put your name on it. It's not till the next morning that we actually put them up on the wall and we go through them as a group and then reveal the artist and see like, did we miss anything in the explanation? All the dots that you see on here, similar just to when you're doing it in person, you put the dots on there to heat map special features. You can see it's all over. You give people a lot of time so they can go in and put hearts on specific things that they want. But the bigger dots are their single vote that they're going to put their money on. And then the big yellow dot is essentially what the decider uses. And I really want to talk about the decider role. So Roger, you were sort of the sponsor and decider for this role. Like, how did you enjoy that role and what were some of the challenges for you?
It's an important role to have, and I was honored to be the one sponsoring this and having that role. The challenges, I think, are putting your ego aside and really listening to, not putting your ego aside, but there's a lot of preconceived, this is a problem I had put a lot of thought into beforehand, and you don't want to fall in love with your own ideas. You really get the chance to listen to what other people are saying, especially in this here. You get to hear what each story is, and then the artist is revealed, and then people are voting on you vote on it beforehand. So you get the idea of like what is resonating with people. So the decider doesn't have to like really decide on everything. And I would say that's what is nice about this, is that you get to hear a lot of people's perspectives before having to decide. And I would say if you're not doing a sprint, that decider has way more weight onto where things go. And it's nice to know that you have some opinions and some voting that goes on ahead of time, that you can actually not sway the decision, but validate, or yes, and sometimes it might sway the decision a little bit. But
for us, I think it's having a person to decide so we can move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that, I try to use a decider in every meeting just to make sure that we can at least just move on to making a decision. And it's just worked wonders just to have a decider, and having a good decider who feels like they want to like quickly facilitate a conversation before they make a decision. You had that sort of like perfect mix. You knew you needed to make a decision quick, but you also knew that maybe there's a fork in the road that you want to discuss. So you did really good. And I think that's a testament to the group and who we had in the room.
Yeah, it's important for the decider to have all the context too. You wouldn't want to put someone that's not super familiar or just very focused on one area to be the decider for the group. You want someone fairly well-rounded as the decider on this, because otherwise, they have to make decisions quick. It makes things go along, but you want to make sure you're working on the right things too.
The next step that we do after that, we select that 1-3 panel, is to then dive into it. And the whole team gets a chance to sort of look at that idea and go, okay, if we had to blow this up into 6 steps to do this idea from beginning to end, what would that look like? And so everybody goes in and gets a chance, 10 minutes to write down what they think the 6 steps are going to be. Everybody, again, as you can imagine, vote on it. And then, Roger, you drop the hammer, which looks like Dean's idea here was taken forward, and we kind of put it down to the bottom. And then we take the best other ideas and put them in here as well. So this is just an interim step before we take all those green things and put them into a storyboard. And the end of our day too is really storyboarding it. So then when the prototypers get to it, they really know what screen we have to do what. And it kind of looks like messy here, but again, we were going really fast for this idea. So on day 1, it looks like our first step looks like this, second, third, fourth, fifth, all the way to step 8 looks like this. And then it gives us a clear understanding of what we're prototyping for the next day. This was a little bit more ad hoc, like our storyboard, Roger, you probably remember, was just a little bit more thin, but I think the team was pretty clear about the steps, and they just had to write one post-it note in each of them. They didn't necessarily have to draw a lot of things, but do you remember much of that storyboard that we made?
Yeah, I would say this is a really difficult step, I would say, but it's an important one to know the process. And because we were a little light on this, it ended up affecting our prototype at the end, I think. So spending the time to put the drawings and put your concepts visually on this part, I think would have actually helped us have a better prototype to present at the end of the day too. So
Yeah.
um, this can be messy. So it's, yeah, this part was where I
That's
think
the
we
one thing I would have
should have.
probably spent a little bit more time is just encouraging them to fill it out a little fuller. But again, we had people who've worked together, so it was easy for them to kind of just get to the point, but we still made it in the end. And so that really concludes the first 2 days. When we go to the third day, we start prototyping. And really, this is anybody could kind of prototype it. You could prototype in PowerPoint, you could prototype on paper. There's so many different things. You could prototype a role-playing thing if you wanted, but it just happened that we were doing something digital. And so we had Trent, we had a few developers, we had some people who were able to do it. They did it in Acture. You could do it in Figma, Sketch, InDesign, Photoshop, you could do anything. But we also have ones like sample prototypes that we've created in just on our own. So people used the mural board and just started making their own device. You can find images. So these are like not super sexy or anything like that, but they only had maybe like an hour and a half to build these prototypes in training. So they kind of look like this, like some matchmaking service for your first date big buddy system. But then we also have other prototypes from other sprints. And, you know, we've even given away created like mural templates that you can just drag and drop interface stuff. And then they created sort of like this, you know, ordering system for a grocery store that they wanted to based on recipe. But largely your guys' prototype looked probably more razor sharp because you guys were using some of the library for the FCC brand, but it doesn't look too far away from, you know, like just a shell of what it is. Talk about what you think that prototype's purpose was.
I think it helped the end user put themselves in that experience that they're going to be going through at the end of the day. I've done some low fidelity testing and I've done some higher fidelity testing, and the higher fidelity you can get, the more real the experience feels for the person being interviewed. So it's, yeah, it doesn't have to be, like you said, it doesn't have to be sexy, but it's important to put them into the scenario or into the scene of what they're about to go through, put them through that experience, I guess.
And
And
so the whole day really was, you know, checking in, talking it out, checking in, talking it out. But you kind of have to give the prototyper, the stitcher, a little bit of time just to kind of do some work. A lot of times they just know if they're testing the next day, they just take it home and then they do a lot of the work and the polish. The designers always have a little bit of pride in it, right? So the next day, though, while we were prototyping, you were also double duty. You were the tester as well. So you were kind of busy working on your test script because you ran the tests from another room while everybody kind of watched on like this big Surface Hub. Kind of give me your feedback on just the whole testing day and what your experience felt like being the tester.
yeah, so being the tester, I quite enjoyed it actually, because I was able to ask or dig deeper on certain experiences that we were trying to get more feedback on, or, you know, certain features, things like that. But like you provided a great script, a starting point on, and tips and tricks on what to do as a tester. So that I was not starting from scratch by any means. So writing the script was actually quite easy. And yeah, as the tester, it just becomes easier and easier as you do more interviews. And in this case, I think we did 4 interviews, or the first one was okay. And then by the end, it just super natural and it becomes very easy, and you know where the hangups are going to be. And it flows a lot easier after you do a couple. But
How important do you think the testing process is? Like, how important was it for you and the team to hear that feedback? Did it make a big difference?
huge difference, huge difference. It was validating certain ideas and actually squashing some of the ideas. So some of the big ideas that came about in the interview stage at the beginning, where people were like, oh, I want to be able to, for instance, I want to be able to pin certain information at the top so that it's right there, it's important and everything. And then when we tested that feature, every single one of them were like, I would never use that. That's a dumb idea. And even the people that asked for it were like, no, I wouldn't use it. So it might sound good in concept, but once they see it, it was like, no, I wouldn't use it. So unless you go through this testing phase, we would have never known. We could have spent a bunch of time developing things like that. So
Right. It's a lot of cost avoidance, right? In the end.
yeah,
So
so
fast, right?
validated certain things, and then it also just like squashed certain ideas pretty quick.
Totally. Okay. That's the whole kind of run through. The question that I want to ask you really is like, where's that project now? Like, what did you guys do right after?
So what we did right after is we refined the prototype some more, and then so where we're at, full transparency, we ended up having to push this work back a little bit just because of resources. There was something else that had to get done first, so we weren't in the development phase right away. But what that also did is it gave us more time to just refine the prototype and test again. So what we've done so far is really just refine, test a few things, and added a few like features and worked on kind of the architecture of how we're going to be able to do this going forward. And we're going to start development in about 2 weeks, hopefully.
Oh,
2 to 3
wow.
weeks.
That's actually pretty, like, to me, in my experience, it rarely happens where it's like, let's sprint on it and you're coding it right after. But like, even just doing it this distance, that's not that bad. So
No, it really helped us accelerate, really. It put concepts in paper, and then, there's still a lot of things we need to figure out along the way, but it sped up the testing, and we didn't have to spend all the time coding and rechanging and stuff. So
right. I was just gonna say, do you have any parting words or tips for the audience today, just on the idea of a sprint? And I can just turn it over. Like I know we might have some questions, so I'll just kind of see if there's a question. But why don't you just kind of give us some parting words or tips for the audience today?
yeah, I would say tip number one is know generally what the outcome you're trying to get to before getting in. This really helps refine the problem and refine the solution, but having know what you're getting into before you commit to it, because I've been part of some sessions that are a little bit too pie in the sky. So, the blue sky ideas are all great, but then what you do with it afterwards is a little bit more difficult. So know the general idea of what you're trying to get to, or what solution you're trying to get to before you get into this. And number two is do it when, like, the timing is important. I know it's very difficult to get judged, but doing it way too early can be problematic, but then doing it too late is also problematic. So find that happy medium. I know it's really difficult to gauge, but if you can do this at the start of the project, but you have resources to continue on and get into building shortly after, that's like the opportune time to do it, the best time to do it.
Right. Yeah. Because you and I have been part of previous sprints and they were okay, but like I felt like this one we came out with a kind of renewed sense of, oh yeah, this process is totally good. You just kind of have to have the right mix. And so awesome. Thank you. Those are some good parting words, but I think we have one question that's coming in right now, and I'm going to read it out loud. How do we fit the design sprint with agile teams working on development? So Roger, maybe kind of talk about how you guys kind of look at both of those kind of streams.
Yeah, so FCC, we work in an agile team framework right now. We have been doing 2-week sprints. This whole, like, historically, things are changing a bit, but we're still in that agile framework. Really, you're still able to compartmentalize your builds and everything within that agile framework. Just this helps you build the big idea, and I don't know how to answer that properly, but 100% it fits within that. There's no.
But if you guys are running your agile sprints, like, how do you guys kind of interrupt the team to go and do like this sort of kind of strategy sprint or planning design sprint?
Okay, yeah. So we do have to basically commit, like, we take one sprint out and we'll do this for the 4 days. And then we do the rest of the sprint. We'll do like the smaller work, something that we know we can do in like a half a sprint where there's a lot of little things that need to get done. We'll take those, 1 points, 2 points, 3 point stories that are kind of just sitting in there in the backlog and just tackle those for the remainder of the sprint.
Okay, so like as the whole transmission's going, you kind of just disengage and it goes in neutral for a bit. So it's not pushing on the same sort of sprints.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what would you say about impacts of the design sprint on resource allocation? Is it just you take the whole team and just go, okay, ideally we're all just going to work on this together and then go back and re-engage with the transmission when it's going?
We've done some with where we take the whole team and disengage, like you said, but there are oftentimes a couple developers will stay in and help with other things and join other teams. But I'm not sure if I'm really the right person to talk too much about the resource allocation on that. But
the questions that are coming in are really kind of, it's great. It's talking about how do we actually go about doing this. One talks about how can I set expectations and timelines for the prototype review, refine cycle.
That one, like within the sprint, it's that 4 days. You'll have a prototype that's tested by the end of the 4 days. And then after that is completely up to you as to if you've got a solution that you think you can get right into design or like into development, go for it. It's not likely that you will. So it all depends on the problem you're trying to solve. So we've had some of these design sprints where it's like a behemoth of a problem where it's a 1-2 year project that setting expectations is going to be very, very different than say developing an onboarding experience or even creating an interaction experience where we know we probably take just a few months to develop. So
yeah, that's another question we get a lot of times is like, we have this behemoth sort of thing. Like, how do we sprint on do we sprint on the big thing or do we kind of chop it up? And a lot of organizations know how to chop it up properly so that this is one sprint, this is another sprint. And it's kind of just like the precursor to a lot of the development work that they're going to do this sort of sprint. Another thing to mention is sometimes there's such thing as a follow-up sprint. So you do the first sprint that we did, and we only was a 1 week or the 4 day, but then you could actually re-sprint, just kind of rejigging some of the activities to actually do a second sprint to do the refinement and get it for a step closer. But as you can imagine, it's just taking the data from the testing, talking about what the new things we learned, getting some alignment on it, and then rethinking about the new storyboard or the new prototype. And companies who are used to that, sometimes they're just so quick, it's just part of the refinement cycle that it's not necessarily like, okay, spend 15 minutes on this role. It's just like they know how to do that better. And that's the whole thing I think about with the sprint is that at first it feels like you're still remembering the steps, but eventually you do this enough, everybody knows what the next step is. So that's the whole idea, is that if you're good, it's like muscle memory. So
yeah. And like how this works within the agile framework is really, it works well. And at the end of the day, when you're working within these sprints, you can't tackle, or maybe you can, but in our case, we can't tackle the entire problem in a single sprint. So we chunk it out and say, okay, for our instance, we were separating like interactions, like communication with customers and documenting it one way. And then like all the other things like the lending activities and things like that in a different stream. So it was piecing it out. What pieces of work can we do in a sprint and then we refine that. So we're gonna be refining those stories in next week.
Awesome.
For this piece. So it all works. It's not like a one design sprint and then you go right into a development sprint. Like it's not a 1-to-1 ratio.
No.
Or maybe it can be, but it's not typically.
It's different for every organization.
Yeah.
Roger, I want to thank you so much for participating. And it's funny that I'm in your office and you're at home. But I got to go across the hall to finish the training here with your colleagues there. It's really been fun. I really appreciate it. If you guys have more questions about sprints, just keep them coming. Zoo's easy to find on the internet. I don't have to share the information. Everybody can find us. Roger, hopefully we have another chance to do another sprint in the future. I have a feeling we're probably going to do one. But I really, really appreciate it, especially coming in from the Dominican. You know, nobody feels sorry for you, but I appreciate that you were able to turn this around quickly for us. So,
no, thanks for having me. Yeah, all I can say is this has definitely changed how our team works and how we solve problems. Having been part of these sprints again and again, it actually has changed a lot of how we solve problems at FCC, and that's a big thanks to Zoo and Al and your team. So thanks.
Okay, we'll send you a little like bribe after this. So, okay, we'll talk soon, man, and have a good rest of the week.
Right on. Thanks,
Okay.
everyone.
See you, everybody.